people have got a lot of things to do in their time rather than listening to my Montessori story, but I appreciate being invited. And also, having a voice. It's good to have a voice to do with these things, And so I guess my Montessori story started in a very peculiar way. I actually had no idea what Montessori was. And I was working in a Muslim school in Sydney with refugees. And those refugees were coming from Syria, Afghanistan, and war-torn countries. And they were coming on boats over from Indonesia. They traveled overland. 5 or 6 months, and these harrowing stories. And they arrived at my class, Year 5-6 teacher, composite class. And they were in a bit of a pickle, to be honest with you, because they'd been through so much trauma. And it was really hard to even contemplate saying, we're going to learn about fractions with different denominators, when I knew their father and mother had been executed, or they'd seen their brother drown in the Straits of Malacca, or something terrible had happened to them. It didn't seem like I had the right to say, and by the way, now we're going to learn about fractions, because there was more going on. So I kind of came up with this, and I thought I was making it up, but I wasn't. In sense, Montessori had invented it 150 years before me. But I decided what I was going to do was I was going to make a classroom of equity and equality, where I was the teacher, but actually I had a lot to learn from these children about culture, about perseverance, about resilience. They were more resilient than I could ever dream of being. They'd made it on these crazy and wild journeys. So we designed a classroom where they had voice, and they had a chance to teach and a chance to tell their story. It gave them, it was almost therapy for them, the mums had said, because they suddenly had a chance to talk about what had happened. And the other children in the class had been through the same thing. So we're all kind of on the same page. And we had this beautiful, harmonious kind of equilibrium in the room. And I was running this classroom like this for a few years. And then the government turned up, and they did a random inspection on the school. And the lady came in, her name was Sue Bremner. She used to work for the AIS, and she was in my class doing an observation. And at the end, she said, look, that was beautiful, she said. It was beautiful. I almost wanted to cry. And I said, oh, thank you, that's really nice. She said, I love the way the room runs, where you're not at the front, and the children get a chance to teach lessons. And there's a curriculum that the children have written, and they have engagement and agency. And I said, yeah, it's great. And she said, tell me, where did you do your Montessori training? And I said, what is Montessori? Isn't that a religion? And she said, no, you must go and look at a Montessori school. I think you're a Montessori teacher, but you have no idea. And so I went to Balmain, and I had a look at Balmain Montessori school. And I walked into stage 3, and I couldn't find a teacher. She was behind a bookcase with one child, and the kids were all just working. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I want to work here. And so I asked, can I work here? And they said, yes, you can. And then I just started working there. And I started my Montessori training. They were really supportive. They said, if you work here, you can train on the job. We're actually a teacher short in stage 3. Would you like to take over stage 3 and teach while you're on the job? And so I just took on the job. And, it's very hard to come to Montessori and then leave and go back to standing at the front and talking all day. You can't do that once you realize the power that you have. So it was a strange entry point, but I'm glad that I discovered it in a bizarre way.
And so you were then a principal for a few years at Farmhouse.
Yeah, I was.
So what expectations did you have on taking that role, and how was reality different after being in the classroom?
Well, to anyone thinking about going into being a principal, and anyone that's done it before, as you might know, there's a great deal of responsibility in that role, because the buck stops with you, and everything that comes your way is your fault if it goes wrong. When it goes right, you want to celebrate it for everybody else, but when it goes wrong, it's your fault. And that's like a kind of interesting, paradox in actual fact, because when it's going really well and the kids are doing wonderful work and things are happening around the world, you say to the teachers, well done, you're doing a great job, and the kids are doing a great job and all that. And when it goes wrong, you buffer all of that. It's never their fault, and you take that on and you're like, it's my fault. Actually, that's my fault. Let me take the hit there. And I knew that I was getting into that as a school principal, but I was very nervous about going into a principal's role. I kind of did it to make my mum proud, to be honest with you, at the very beginning, because I'm from a very poor family. My mum was a single mum. My dad left before I was born, and my mum, it was me and her for a very long time. And she always wanted the best for me, and I wanted to show her that I could crawl my way to the, if you call it, the top. And being a school principal is kind of, the peak of education, if you want to put it that way, in terms of responsibilities. And I wanted to tell her that I'm a school principal now. And, she was so proud. She walked around the supermarkets in my home village going, "Did you know my son is a principal? He's a principal." Literally had a T-shirt saying he's a principal, and everyone was sick of hearing her say that. But it made me happy that she was so proud, because, she worked so hard to try to, as we were very young, we had nothing. And so getting into the role, I've done a lot of work for charity. So I've been running in my own little charity for 3 or 4 years, building schools in the Himalayas, and just doing it on my own. And I was very fortunate in, I don't know if any of you know Bill McKeith or William McKeith. He used to be the principal of Presbyterian Ladies College. He was, I think he was one of them, he's knighted by the Queen. He's a dear friend of mine, and he was the principal at at Balmain. And I had one final practicum in my training to become a Montessori teacher. And I've been to, all the Montessori schools around Sydney. And I knocked on his door and I said, "Hey, Bill, I've got one more practicum to do. Would you mind if I do it in Nepal?" And he said, "Gavin, it's a bit of a stretch. I don't mind if you go to Western Australia, but the Himalayas is quite far." I said, "Bill, come on." And he said, "Okay, look, you can do it in Nepal." So I flew over to Nepal. I did this prac work in a training center over there. And it was a terrible training center. And I helped them to make it better. And we improved it and did a lot of work for those guys, and used the community to kind of rally, collecting materials and money, and got addicted to building these kind of schools. And then when I took on the principal's role, what I thought was, well, I have a whole school at my disposal now. Like, I have all these kids and I have all these families who are absolutely loaded. And they probably don't know what life is like on the other side of the world. Some of them will, but some of them definitely don't. And I thought, my job, if I take on this job as principal, is to show them what it's like and what they can do, and empower them. I called it the executive reality check, and said, did you know what it's like to go to school if you live in Pokhara, or if you live in, Noakot, or any of these places, and show them that. And they were like, "Oh my God, it's terrible there." And I said, "Well, we can do something about it." And suddenly rally the entire community to start doing it. And I wanted to do that, and it worked really well. We had whole school rallying towards raising thousands of dollars, running marathons dressed as grannies. I had the whole school running as a granny around Sydney, raising thousands of dollars, and then we'd build a school in the Himalayas, come back to school and say, "Look what we did." And the kids are like, "We want to do it again, Gavin." I said, "You tell them we can do it again." And then we just do it over and over again. And it was about, Montessori said, be the bridge between the child and the difference they want to make. And it's kind of like that. The kids wanted to make a difference, and I knew where the difference had to be made, and if I could bridge the gap and empower the kids. And so it was that. It was brilliant. There are times when it was very difficult. No question about that. Being a principal is hard because things go wrong, and sometimes things don't work. And they say never work with animals or children, and it's true, because children will just do things that you never expected, and you'll just be thrown off piste, and you won't be able to catch your breath. But ultimately, there's a lot to learn on this journey, right? So I think the greatest thing about it was seeing the teachers grow within the school. I had a policy in my school where I'd take non-Montessori teachers in, and I would train them on the job. They'd work under a Montessori teacher in the classroom, but I had one room with 2 non-Montessori teachers and 1 Montessori teacher. And they grew into the most beautiful, amazing Montessori teacher that I've ever seen. And they came in with no understanding of what Montessori was, and I did this onboarding with them. And I left the school, and they hook, line, and sinker Montessori now. And I think that that's probably something, if we can use that, not saying that my method is right, but there is a lot of teachers out there at the moment who are feeling disengaged with the profession. The mass resignation that's happening at the moment in schools is all about teachers feeling that they can't be the teacher they've always wanted to be. And Montessori offers that to teachers, to say, "Hey, we trust you. Get in here. Be the teacher you've always dreamed of." And the more we can sing and shout from the top of the tallest mountain that that's what Montessori offers you, the more teachers we'll have coming our way, and that's what we need.
So what was behind that policy of bringing in non-Montessori teachers to the school?
Because I used to not sleep at night time in fear that one of my teachers would say, I'm leaving. And I'd be like, no, where am I going to find a teacher from? There's no teachers anywhere. And it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare having that thought the whole time. So, you know, the policy was, how do we buffer that? So it was, I went to the board and I said, hello, board, this is what I think we need to do. Instead of employing assistants, what we should do is employ fully qualified teachers who are interested in Montessori, and they'll work in the classroom as an assistant on a teacher's salary because they're not too far apart, and they'll train on the job. And then if Barbara leaves, by the way, I didn't have anybody called Barbara, but if Barbara leaves, then the assistant can step up straight away and they've had, you know, a year's training. And so they know the culture, they know the philosophy, blah, 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 blah. And it worked beautifully because at that point I could then sleep and go, it's okay if Barbara leaves because I've got, you know, Toby who can step in. And that's a nice position to be in because, you know, just looking at it right now, there's three of the biggest Montessori schools in New South Wales, just looking on Seek today, all need a stage 3 teacher, all three of them. They all need a 9 to 12 teacher. Where are they going to find them? They're just not going to find them. They don't exist. And so that's a nightmare for a school to have that, because, you know, what you don't want is not to have a Montessori teacher in a Montessori school. So how do you work that out? You know?
Vocational training. When I did my training in the United States, it was required a full year internship, and I found that was the most important learning part of my training, was being with a master teacher for a full year. Really, you know, to be part of the planning and the setting up the room and making relationships with children. So I really get how that would be a good way to train teachers. Yeah,
because, you know, a change of guard is hard for any community. You know, if the teacher leaves and you say, well, Barbara's leaving, but don't worry, we're on the hunt for a new teacher. If Barbara's leaving, but Toby is already in the classroom, and you already know everybody, he's a fully qualified teacher, he's done 1 year of Montessori training, don't worry, he's going to take over. He knows all your kids, he knows the materials. Yes, he's not fully qualified, but he can still turn over a tile and move a cube over here, and he can still do a 3-period lesson. That's not so hard. You know, you can still handle it. The whole education system is not going to come falling down at this point, but the consistency with your children is still there. There's no anxiety. You know, it's all good. And don't you worry about it. We're out on the hunt for another teacher who's going to step in and do the training and and we're going to get the right person. We're not going to panic and steal somebody else's teacher from another Montessori school. We're not after going to fly to the US and do job hunting that's going to cost 80 grand of your money, which is sitting in the pot. You know, we're not doing any of that. We have another system in place which is going to work. And so, you know, that's, if we could, in England, they have a really interesting concept, and I like it, and we should have it here in Australia, where if you are an assistant working alongside a teacher in any school, after 4 years, you can convert that to becoming a fully qualified teacher, because you've sat in a classroom looking at a fully qualified teacher for 4 years every day. You've been teaching group, you've been reading stories, you've been teaching phonics, you've done, you know, all of those number bonds, all those wonderful things. I mean, that's basically a full-time 24-hour-a-day degree, hands-on. So they go, right, okay, with a couple of little assignments, you're a qualified teacher, off you go. And we should have that. We should have that. That should be our process here, because that would solve a huge problem for us as Montessori schools.
It is a huge problem right now. So of all the places that could use your help in the world, what drew you to Nepal? I've heard rumors that you're a rock climber. Did that have anything to do with it, or were there other things?
I am a rock climber. I love rock climbing, yes. And Nepal has got lots of rocks, big mountains, yes. And don't tell Bill McKeith this, because he'll come after me. But when I went to him saying I want to go to Nepal to help this school, actually I knew there were mountains there, and I wanted to go and look at them as well. So it was two things, obviously. But yes, I did want to go there. But you know, for anyone who's been to Nepal, it is the most awe-inspiring place in the world. It puts everything in perspective. Like all the things that we're bothered about, like, oh my goodness, my phone isn't charged, or what am I going to do about my shoes, or anything. And nothing really matters anymore. It doesn't really matter, because, you know, you realize when you're there that the most valuable, this sounds very, philosophical, but I'm not trying to be, but the most valuable thing we have is time. It really is. And we squander it here in the Western world. And, having worked in lots of, quite wealthy, suburbs where, sometimes some children are, brought to school in an Uber, and Foodora delivers their lunch, and then they left. They're brought at 6 and they leave at 6. And then mum says, I'm not sure about my daughter, what's happening with her. You say, well, I want to be brutally honest with you. She comes to school in an Uber and goes home in an Uber, and no one picks her up. And, it's pretty obvious what's might be happening. And we forget something really important. And it's not just here, and it's not just it's in the Western world, in actual fact. I feel like we're too driven to get as much cash as we can to buy the biggest house and the fastest car and the Maserati and the iPhone 14 and all these kind of things. And that means money, and we need cash. And that cash means you have to work longer hours, or you have to work at night time. And you go to Nepal, and Nepal, they have nothing, zero. In fact, some communities I've worked in, the money doesn't exist. They don't have that money. They have a plot of land and a buffalo, and they grow their rice for 4 months. They harvest it. All the rice goes in the house, and they go, that's all the rice we've got for the whole year. So we're going to use it really, really wisely. Well, we've got a buffalo, and every morning, we're going to wake up and we're going to milk the buffalo. And then we're going to get some of the milk and we're going to turn it into curd. And we're going to get some of the milk and we're going to boil it and we're going to drink it. But some of the milk we're going to give to our daughter. And on her way to school, she's going to sell it at the market and she's going to pay for school. And then on the way home, I'm going to meet you at school. Mum's going to meet her at school and walk her home and then tell her how much she loves her all the way home, and sit in the garden, comb her hair for 40 minutes and say, I'm so proud of you and I love you and I'm here for you and I believe in you. And I've seen it with my eyes, and we forget that sometimes. We don't have time for that. And I think that's, we have problems with anxiety and mental health is running rife in the Western world because we don't value time. And in Nepal, that's all they have. And there was a man I met on a bus once. We were flying to a really remote village. Sorry, that's not true. We were building a school in a really remote village, and I had like 10 tons of stuff to take there. And I said, let's fly. It's $100 to hire an aeroplane for a 12-minute flight. And he insisted that we get the bus, which is 100 rupees, which is about 10 cents. But it's 9 hours on the bus. So I said, no, it's fly. He said, no, bus. I said, fly. He said, bus. So we took the bus. Anyway, 8 hours into the trip, up in the mountains at 5,000 meters, one of the wheels fell off, rolled off the mountain. We slumped to one side. We got off the bus, and I said to the driver, what are we going to do? And he said, don't worry about it, brother, he said. Another bus is on its way. And I said, oh, amazing. Where's it coming from? And he said, it's coming from where we started. And I said, that was 8 hours away. And he goes, well, with traffic, it's now 15 hours. And I was like, oh, my God. And I turned to my friend who I was on the bus with, and I said, I told you, we should have taken the flight. It would have taken 12 minutes. And he turned to me and said, Gavin, in your country, you have lots of money and no time. And in my country, we have no money and we only have time to spend, and I'm happy to spend it with you. And we sat there for 20 hours looking at the stars, and it was amazing, and I'll never forget it. And I, at that moment, realized how important time is, and you can't squander it.
Gavin, in the time I've known you, you strike me as somebody who's really got that work-life balance down pretty well. And this is a chronic problem in education, I think in particular in Montessori for teachers and principals. How do you do it? Was that experience in Nepal something that really taught you how to balance that?
I had a really terrible school principal when I was working in a school once, and he was awful. In fact, the worst school principal I ever worked for. And, we say model the behavior you wish to view. Well, he was modeling the behavior I never wish to view again in my life or be. And so what he would do, being a principal to him was about power. And so it was all about control and having control over all of us. Little did he know that when you have a common enemy, the whole team rally against that enemy. So if you've got an awful principal, the team seems to be very tight because you all hate this principal and you're all just in the staff room going, God, I hate this guy. Let's gather together and take him down and, all this stuff. And not that I would ever condone revenge or anything, but it was kind of, we were really together in this one. And what he would do is he'd, in the school holidays, we'd have 3 weeks holiday in July, but he would make us come in week number 2. He'd say, we're running a PD in week 2. And I would say, but I wanted to go to the UK and I can't go now because it's in week 2. And he said, well, find another job. So anyway, so I hated that, and everybody hated that. So when I took over Farmhouse, it was interesting because I said to all the staff, I said, at the school holidays, the school is closed, by the way. I'm locking the door on the Friday and I'm opening it on the Monday. You're not coming in. They're like, Gavin, but what are we going to do? And I said, well, you're going to go on holidays. What are you going to do? You're going to go to the mountains, the rivers. You're going to get your fingers dirty. You're going to play with your kids. You're going to, whatever you want to do, you're going to do that. And you'll come back reinvigorated with experience and life, and you'll be full of energy, and the kids will be inspired by you, and then they'll be inspired to learn. And in the beginning, it was a culture shock for those guys because they were like, well, what do I do? And I said, this is part and parcel of being a teacher. This is a hard job. But also, I was also being selfish again because I wanted to go to Nepal. So I didn't want them coming in while I was overseas. So I was like, no, we're all closed. And the board at the beginning, the board were like, hey, I called reception, but no one's answering. And I said, well, we're shut. All the enrollments are done. The forms are sent out. The programs are written. The classroom's prepared. There's nothing to do. So why would we even come in? And it was because I also wanted that too. And, it's really important that you have that work-life balance because, if you want to be energetic and you want the kids to be inspired by you, you can't come in like a bag of potatoes. You've got to come in like, by the way, guys, I was rock climbing last night and the kids are like, you were rock climbing? I thought you were a teacher. Don't you live in the cupboard? And I don't live in the cupboard. I go rock climbing. I do things. And, I've climbed a mountain. Here's a picture. And the kids are like, wow. And so they realize that you're real. And then you can also turn to them and say, I'm sad today. My cat died. And the kids are like, you're sad? I thought you were an adult. Adults don't get sad. You say, of course I get sad. I'm a human being. And I've made a mistake. And they go, you made a mistake? And say, of course I made a mistake. And you can be sad. You can make a mistake. You can have fun. Like you've got to model those things. You can't expect the kids to have a balance if you're not having a balance too. And kids, I've learned in 25 years, are astute. They read you like a book. They've got you. If you are not prepared, and everybody here as a teacher, you'll know this, you walk into a classroom and you're not prepared, the kids will smell it on you. And they go, oh no, he's not prepared. Let's eat him for breakfast. And you're finished. They've got you. And the same when you're tired, or the same when you're not, you're not inspired. They can sniff that on you. But if you're full of zest and you're enjoying this thing we call life, then they also enjoy it too. So I think it's very important to have that.
So what are some of the most challenging times or things that you did as a principal?
Most challenging as principal. Well, look, I tried to avoid this. It's hard to avoid this, but I always dreaded when I was a teacher and the principal said, look, we've got Nelly, get all the programs ready, get the policies updated. And it was all this mad scramble to get everything ready for the inspector to come in. And you could sense this anxiety with everybody because it was like, oh my God, what if we get developing or we get, we don't get the 5 stars and all this stuff. And so when I came to school and took over, I only had 4 months and Nessa were coming in. I was like, oh my God, like I'm walking in. And it was a bit nerve-wracking. And so they came in and it was just a 1-year inspection. So it was just adding an extra year. And I knew they were coming the year after. So they did the inspection. It was all fine. They went away. And then I wanted to shake things up a bit and go a bit left field. So I decided that I was going to advertise the fact that in my school we had no exams, no grades, no percentages, no scores, no ranking, no nothing. None of that. We're just going to gauge the children. And you're a Montessori teacher, so you know this. But the rest of the world don't really know how this works. So I thought, I'm just going to put it out there that in my school, we don't have any of these things. And so I called the Manly Daily, the newspaper, and I said, by the way, just to let you know, in the school up the road, we don't have any of these things. And they put it front page on the newspaper, the school with no exams. Then the Daily Telegraph put it on the front of their paper. And it said, I'll never forget this headline, immigrant principal ignores government regulations and teaches what he wants. Anyway, and then I had the Board of Studies call me up and say, look, we've seen the article and we're coming in to do a random inspection on your assessment procedure. So I was like, okay, I've got nothing to hide. And I had all my checks and balances. We were observing the children. We're doing graphs of work. We were doing benchmark reading and getting their reading level. We were doing everything you can. We were having consultations, conferences. We were having reports. Everything was fine. We were assessing what we taught. And so the government came in and she said, I'd like to see your assessment policy and everything. And I showed it to her and I explained it to her and why it was more, more beneficial to have this kind of assessment than an exam that really didn't tell me much apart from how the child did on that day. And she left and she said these words. She said, I don't need to come back here, and this is exactly how schools should be. And she just walked out the door. And that was really difficult because it was really risky. I was feeling nervous when she came in and she was going to say, this is not right. But I mean, the curriculum in Australia allows you to have that freedom, to that flexibility, but quite often we just get stuck in this way that it's always been done. And we always write the exams in week 8, and we always give them to the kids in week 9, and then we always get those results in week 10. Then we always put those exam results in the report and we send it home to the families. But actually that's flawed now, and it's wrong, and it doesn't hold any weight in the way we assess our students at all. Why would you compare all the students in your school? I mean, look at year 12 here, no, year 11 here in Australia. It is mandatory if you have a year 11 student in class for the teacher to tell them their rank in that class. It's mandatory. I have teachers who work in those schools, and so they're in year 10, year 11, they have to say to the students, you're 12th in this class, you're 13th in this class. They don't have to say it publicly. They hand them a little slip of paper that says, or they whisper it in their ear, but they have to know. But does it make sense to me? There's a school down the road with another group of kids and one further down the street. So if you're going to compare them to everyone, or don't compare them at all. And it's impossible to do the first one. So why compare them? Anyway, the lady, the inspector, she accepted, obviously that was fine. And then I had the phone just started ringing hot. My PA was like, Gavin, the phone won't stop ringing. Schools all around the country, because we're on 2GB radio, are saying, can you send them your assessment policy? And so I said, Suzanne, here it is, send it to everyone. And my hope was that other schools were going to say, we're going to do this too. Like, we're going to have conferences with the children. We're going to interview them. We don't need to do a test anymore. But, change is hard, and these things take time. And that's tricky because, you want to change things. It's difficult when there's so many people who don't like change. It's difficult for people to absorb.
So why do you think Montessori is not more widely adopted in Australia and around the world? I mean, in Australia, only about 0.5% of schools are Montessori, and perhaps triple that for early childhood centres, which still isn't really anywhere near enough to bring about Dr. Montessori's agenda for social reform. So, I think when I did the back of the napkin calculation, it was about 0.012% of children in Australia are served by Montessori schools. And for a movement with so much potential, after 115 years, there really isn't any way of sugarcoating that. So if Montessori is such a great thing, why isn't there a Montessori school in every LGA in Australia?
I think, that question is a very big question. There's about 50 answers to it. I think that some of the answers to that question are that there's a huge misunderstanding about what Montessori is, first of all. You all Montessori teachers yourselves, and the amount of people you've probably been to a barbecue and they say, so tell me, what's different about Montessori? And then you're off. Like, you're like, okay, how long have you got? Let me just tell you everything. And then by the end of it, they're like, God, stop talking about Montessori. You clearly love it. But, there's a misunderstanding of what it is, first of all. There's no question about that. And I think that I've definitely made that one of my agenda points in my life since I discovered it, is to tell more and more people about it and get them. I mean, the amount of friends I have now, I've had kids who are now going to Montessori schools, is remarkable. My friend, I put him down as the tightest guy I know. He will not spend, if there's a bus that's 5 hours long and an Uber and there's a $1 difference, he'll take the 5 buses. And now he's going to go to Canberra Montessori School when he would never, ever think of that. And I just think there's not enough knowledge around what it is and the benefits of it and how it actually works, number one. Number two, there's not enough teachers to supply the schools that maybe want to have Montessori, in their ecosystem. It just doesn't exist. Just actually not feasible right now to have 200 schools here in Australia. It's just not 200 Montessori teachers. That's just a fact. And I think the third thing is that it's actually now for the rich. It's gone down the avenue of being for those who've got money. And here in Australia, especially. In the US, it's different. It's heavily entrenched in the public system and you can find it for free. Here, you cannot find it for free. It is for people who have money. And that's just a fact. And so if those three things change, we'll see more Montessori. And I've kind of taken on part of my mission is to try to get more people to know about Montessori. I mean, in the last 5 years of going to Nepal, literally there was almost no Montessori schools in Nepal. And then we opened 2 teacher training centers with the most basic Montessori teacher training, of which Hani has just recently supplied me with tons and tons of Montessori materials. So thank you, Hani. So kind of you. But now there's Montessori schools everywhere. All those teachers who came along, they just go, well, I'm going to open my own school. I'm going to open a Montessori school. And when you know about it, you're not going back. There's no going back from knowing about it. You know, it's like never have tasted water before, and suddenly you go, what's this thing called water? That's the only thing I'm going to drink now. Like you can't retreat from it. And so I just think that when people discover it, and if we can stand on top of the tallest mountains and shout it out, and I also think this, is that Montessori teachers, in my opinion, are very humble, quiet, lovely people who go, ooh, no. I'm just going, oh, no, I would never do that. I'm just working with my kids and doing a wonderful job with my little, and I've been accused of being egotistical and whatever else. But actually, the reality is that I just feel that someone needs to stand on top of Mount Everest and shout out Montessori very loud, Montessori, and everyone hear that. Because the sooner that happens, the better off our kids will be, because the fact is the breadth and the width of the skills they learn in a Montessori school is phenomenal compared to what you will get in mainstream. And just this week, and there are some good mainstream schools, but putting your hand up to go to the toilet and all those tiny things, you can't believe they're happening. I was in a school a few weeks ago, and the kids were like, can I go to the toilet? I was like, you're 13. Like, I've got 3-year-olds who don't need to put their hand up to go to the toilet, and then that's nothing. That's the most basic of simple skills. But if that's still happening, then we're a long way away.
So why do you think there's such a shortage of Montessori teachers in Australia? I mean, we have the Montessori Institute where you did your training, which has rotating classes in every capital city. It's a big outfit. But we still have this incredible shortage of Montessori teachers here. Why do you think that is?
It's long, it's hard, it's expensive. You have to leave your job for a year if you want to do the creme de la creme of AMI, and you have to color in your own albums. One of my I was doing MWEI, and my friend was doing AMI, and he said, oh God, I wish I'd done yours. And I said, why? And he said, I've got to color in my album with pencil crayon. I said, you've got to color it in? He said, I have to color it in. I said, why are you coloring it in? Like he said, it's part of the training, and we can color in. I'm a grown adult. I know how to color in between the lines. So I think it's got to be. Yes, there is AMI and the training that my friend got was better than my training. There's no question. It was better. He had more hands-on. He was in the room for a year. It was more time with the materials. But it wasn't for everyone. You can't just step out of your job for a year and not get paid. Like, you've got a mortgage and bills and food to put on the table. It's just not feasible. And so there has to be a hybrid version of that. There's got to be some middle ground that works, where you can still get your hands dirty and get a lot of exposure to the materials, but you don't have to leave your job, and you can still be engaged with the children in the classroom. I think I remember calling Bernadette Hendry from the MWEI and saying, hey, Bernadette, I was driving home and I was like, I've got this idea, why don't we just have, in all of the schools around the country, one teacher who is the lead teacher, but not the lead. She's the lead trainer. She's not a trainer, but she's very good at being a Montessori teacher. And then other teachers who are not Montessori can come in and learn on the job under her wing. She can have 2 days off a week. And after a year, they've had 140 days of face-to-face training under her wing, but they still work in a school. And it was just too difficult to put it all together and make it work. But I mean, there has to be a solution. And if you don't find a solution, then you've got a problem on your hands, because they're just going to die a death. Because there's just not enough teachers coming out of the machine to fuel the demand for Montessori. It's just a fact. Just look and see New South Wales right now. 3 stage 3 teachers required in the top 3 schools in this state. Like, where are they going to find them? I have no idea.
Yeah. I often felt when I was training that the ideal model of Montessori training, that we have that comes from the AMI model, it was sort of came out of an era where Montessori teaching was mostly for women who were married and, you know, got their income from their partners and had all that time, and, you know, but it doesn't match the world today. How do we make Montessori match the way the world works now more than it did 100 years ago, or even
Well,
50
if you put, I mean, that's just ridiculous that we'd even have that concept in our mindset, considering it's the 21st century and equity is on everyone's mind, and we're not living in a world like that anymore at all. And obviously, you know, we're under the pump financially. People are more time strapped in terms of what they've got. And if you're asking people to step out of their role and go and do this for 1 year, we're not working, we're really going to get not many people taking it up. That's just a fact. So, I mean, there has to be a system in place where you can still work and you can train at the same time. I think personally, you know, some of the best teachers I've met, you know, regardless of, they're not formally trained trainers, you know, they haven't got that formal qualification. But if I sat with them and I worked under them or with them for a year in their classroom, that after a year, I'd have a really good grasp of most of the materials. I would know how the classroom ran. I would know about the philosophy, how to run group, how to assess, how to document graphs of work, all those things. I think we have to move it to a more hands-on approach where you can stay in the classroom and work alongside someone and take down this kind of hierarchical, there's only one trainer in the entire country. You know, that's just think about that. That's not feasible. If you had that in any other branch of industry, like imagine there was only one trainer to train doctors in this country, one person who could train, everybody would be dead. That wouldn't be working. You know, that it just wouldn't be true. It's just not feasible. And so there has to be something different to enable. I think we have to put trust in some of our best teachers to be able to guide new trainees. And maybe there's just a final assignment, an exam, an observation. You go, you know what? You've got it. You've been working for bloody 2 years under Barbara. She's an amazing teacher. I'll trust you. You can learn the rest on the fly. It's not a problem. We'll let you go. We have to come up with something, and if we don't, we're going to have a serious problem on our hands.
How do we change this? I think what you're talking about comes from this idea that purity is important in Montessori above all else. And how do we change this idea in Montessori that's very common here, that if you're going to do Montessori, you have to do it perfectly, that if you don't hold your finger in the right way when you're doing the pouring exercises, then you're going to ruin the child forever. You know, that we can't make a mistake, otherwise the child will suffer.
Look, it is true, of course, that if you teach something wrong, it's very hard to unteach it. I've done it before myself. I hadn't done my research. I was teaching, you know, something bizarre like, you know, fractions with different denominators. I was 1 year in and I thought, oh yeah, I think I can understand this. And I taught it wrong on the board. And all the kids were writing it down. And I realized it's wrong. This is wrong. And all the kids had got it right in their eyes, but it was all wrong. And it's awful to have that feeling. You know, we've all probably been there before. You're unprepared, you try to wing it, and it goes horribly wrong. So I would never condone or advocate for teaching things incorrectly and being unprepared. If you don't know a material, you don't touch it. But we live in an era now where I can watch a YouTube video of how to use the checkerboard, and I can teach the checkerboard the next day. 100%, not a problem. It's not hard. Put some beads on a piece of wood, transfer them diagonally to the bottom, count them up, and then write on this piece of paper the answer. That is not hard for a grown adult to do. And you can learn in many different ways now. There are some like the binomial cube and all these ones that are very, very hard and need a lot more practice and a lot more training. But I would say we need to let go of that a little bit, you know, let the reins go a little bit and have some trust in the way that we now learn very differently. We watch podcasts, we do online training, we do modules on Moodle, and we get diplomas, we get degrees. We've just sent the kids home for 2 years and said, you're going to learn remotely, but we're still saying to our Montessori teachers, you've got to come in here and you're going to move these tiles around, otherwise I'm not giving you a degree. So, you know, it's a bizarre, you know, we're being very hypocritical in the way that we're operating in actual fact, and we're not moving with the times. So I think there's never an advocacy for getting something wrong or teaching something incorrectly. You have to be prepared, but there are a multitude of ways now in which we can take on this knowledge that we're just not accounting for, and that's just a fact.
I really like what you were talking about with in terms of vocational training for teachers. I really believe there needs to be more of that, and it needs to be a bigger part of training rather than just the 4 or 8 weeks that we tend to do it here now.
Yeah, I think that definitely that is the case. I mean, one thing I learned during lockdown with the kids being at home was amazing, actually, was that I've done a lot of online learning in my time, and I do online lessons every week for free, and I've done them for many years now. And what happens is, at the very beginning of doing my online teaching, and I had schools all around the world tuning in, I just had my laptop and a camera. It was just me, and I was teaching, and then I would flick to a PowerPoint, show them a PowerPoint, and back to me, PowerPoint me, and it was okay, but it wasn't great. And then it was online learning last year, and I'd done all this research around technology. And I remember showing you and Harney this, and I had an overhead camera and a front camera. And with a little switcher that was invisible to everyone, I could flick to overhead, I could flick to me. I could even flick to an iPad where I had Google Earth. And I remember showing you to this, and I remember Harney was very impressed. And so I had children in my class, and it was a Montessori school, and I said to my teachers, don't worry, guys, I'll take a third of the lessons. I didn't want to put them under too much pressure. So I was teaching stage 2, and it was, I'll never forget, area of a triangle, right? And you all know this material, and I've never, ever been able to get a 6-year-old to get the formula and solve an area of a triangle and get it over the line. I've never been able to do that. So it was taking a bit more time than I thought. And I was teaching online. I had about 30 6-year-olds in the class. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. Got the material out, flicked to the overhead camera. Obviously I said today we're going to learn about area of a triangle, I got the material. Because the overhead camera, suddenly they had the back of my hands on the table. It was the right way up. It wasn't upside down. And I got to move the materials, and they all got it. And they all had their own little materials at home that we sent home. And, something like 90% of the kids got it. They got it. I was like, oh my God. And I remember reflecting, thinking, how did they get this when I've never been to do that in the classroom, when there's 4 kids sitting in front of me? And 3 things struck me. Number one, that they had an overhead camera, which they'd never had before. That was number one. And they saw it the right way around. Number 2, they had me one-on-one. I had 30 of them. They had just one of me. So to them, they were like, oh, it's just Gavin. It's just Gavin and me for 1 hour. This is great, which is very rare. And so there was this anomaly there. And I think if we use that, now as part of our training, and if we upskill the people who are training and using these things, then, and they go, well, I didn't realize we could use an overhead camera. I didn't realize it was a switcher. I didn't realize I could just flick to an iPad. And, with the iPad, it was crazy. You'd be teaching volcanoes. Say, we're going to learn about volcanoes. And children are like, wonderful. Okay. And I say, who would like to go to Mount Vesuvius? And they're like, can we? I said, of course we can. And I just flick to the iPad on Google Earth, and we'd fly. I don't know if you've seen it before, but you can fly across the world. And you end up at Mount Vesuvius, and it's a 3D, and you go, would you like to go in the vent? And you go in the vent, and the kids' minds are, and this is what we can offer now. In our classrooms, we have got, and I'm not saying technology is the answer, because it's not. We've got these laminated A3 cards with a picture of a volcano with this red colored in paper, which is showing them lava coming out. But would you rather, maybe we can go to Vesuvius now. Let's go there right now. Kids are like, can we go there right now? Like, we need to, if we use that as part of our training, like we're going to take this thing global. It's going to be huge. And we've got the tech to allow us to do it, but let's utilize that. Yeah.
So those charts were, the best technology that was available in 1950, but it's not necessarily anymore. So yeah, maybe.
Look, they are good. They do their job. Like they're very consistent. They're labeled correctly. You've got everything's there. You know where it is. But also, if you want to go and look at a live feed of Hawaii's volcano erupting right now, you can. There's a live feed. And so why not have both? Why not have that? The kids are like, oh my, I saw lava today. I didn't know I would ever see lava. I actually saw it live. Like I remember teaching we did the great story, the coming, no, I can't remember which story it was, but we ended up talking about Mars. And some children were saying, Gavin, did you know there's a rover on Mars? And I said, yes. And did you know you could actually go and have a look live as it drives around? And so we went to have a look live, and you can do a live feed through the camera, and it's driving around Mars. And suddenly all the kids are on Mars, like, which is amazing.
VR and AI hold enormous potential, not just for classrooms, but also for training. So if you're at home and you put on the VR goggles and you can walk into a pristine classroom and almost touch the materials, I think that offers so much potential for training. It's not the same as being there and playing with the materials, but for some aspects of training, it would.
But there are some places that you will never go and you will never be. If you take a child in the Himalayas, 99% of the children in Nepal will never, ever see a wave crash in the ocean. Never in their life, never. It's a landlocked country. They don't even have a passport. They're not leaving. There's no ocean to go and look. So you want to teach them about biodiversity in the ocean and sustainability and why they shouldn't put their plastic in the river. And you want to teach them that. And they go, well, I've never seen the ocean, so I don't know what you're talking about. And I've never tasted a fish. So don't tell me that it's polluting the waterways and killing off the fish, because those things to me are on another planet or in history. And so you say, well, actually, why don't we go to a live feed of the Barrier Reef? And they go, oh my God, this is real almost. You can almost bring it to them. And if we avoid that, if we miss that out, then we're doing a disservice to those children who can't experience it firsthand. We're living in a very privileged world here. We can just go down to the ocean and see a wave. They will never see a wave. And we can bring that to their doorstep.
So what are you doing now? You left Farmhouse last year. What have you been doing since?
It's been drinking lots of tea, Yorkshire tea. I'm from Yorkshire, so I love tea. So I've had lots of cups of tea, and maybe 20 cups of tea today. Stroking my cat. I've got 2 cats. Lots of that kind of stuff. No, I'm only joking with you. I've actually, I opened a company. Basically, I did a test in September, and the test was that I realized after the story I just told you, where it didn't matter how many kids were on the screen. It didn't matter to them because they had me one-on-one. I realized that as long as I could do a really good lesson with my overhead camera and everything, that it wouldn't matter how many kids were on the other side of the screen, I could teach them all pretty well, considering. And so in September, I ran this week called World Education Empathy Week. And I put a little form out online. And I said to my network online, I said, I would like you to donate 1 hour of your time as a teacher to me. And I want you to fill this form in, give me an hour, and just write down what is your best lesson that you can teach. What's the best thing you've got in your artillery? And so I said, give me an hour and choose your slot. And 13,900 teachers filled it. So I didn't have that many hours. But the idea was that I would run a school that was open 24 hours a day for 1 week online. And so imagine that everybody in a certain time zone, in that time zone, school would start at 9. And Jane, you'd be on 9 till 10. You're on the 9 till 10 shift and you're teaching phonics. So Jane, at 9 o'clock, like a sunflower that opens up when the sun rises in that time zone, let's say New Zealand, Jane's like, hello, everybody. It's Jane here, and welcome to Phonics with Jane. And online, there's just a link, and any child in that time zone who cannot get to school for any reason, but they have the internet, clicks the link, and there's Jane. Hello, guys, Phonics with Jane. And they all come to school. Now, when Jane's hour is up, Jane says, bye, everybody. I'll see you next week. And she goes. And then Nicole turns up from 9 till 10. And it's 9 till 10, it's narrative writing with Nicole. All those kids, they stay online. But now Nicole steps in. Hello, everybody, it's Nicole here. Welcome to Narrative Writing with Nicole. And then 10 till 11, it's Sandra pops up and goes, hello, guys, it's science with me. We're going to learn about botany this week. And anyway, so I did this week where school just didn't close. And I had all these teachers, 260 of them across the world. And we had schools 24 hours running nonstop. And the highlight, in fact, my partner, she said I was crazy that week because I had about 15 laptops and 20 iPads. I was watching hundreds of lessons all at the same time. But it was really amazing to see. The highlight was on the Wednesday at 1:30, there was a man in Delhi teaching landscape painting. His name was Maninder Maan. I'll never forget. There were 13,000 kids in his lesson, 13,000. And there was him in his bedroom, he was a teacher, overhead camera, he had beautiful satar music playing on, la, 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 and he was painting, and there were 13,000 kids all across the world, all painting as well. And then at that moment, I realized it's doable. This is doable because you've got girls in Afghanistan who can't go to school, but they've got the internet. In fact, just out of interest, they've got faster internet than I have here in Sydney. My internet is terrible. They've got 5G internet, no school. In fact, they can't leave their house. They have an iPad, they have a phone, and they have a link. If I can get that link to them and they can click it, and Jane, you can teach them phonics. All you need to do is go, hello, it's Jane with phonics. So what I did was I left my job and I opened a company called Upschool with a friend of mine. And basically we started putting together educational 10-week learning sequences for free and sending them out. And we had, in term one, we had a pilot scheme where we just put 10 schools in Victoria and we just put them through the paces to see if it was working. And then that was good, 10 schools, maybe about 1,200 kids, which is okay. And I've just written term 2, which is how to write a book to change the world. It's about children. Basically what it is children write a book with me and I teach them about characters. By the way, I've written lots of children's books in the past. I've written lots of children's books previously. Basically, they choose a character, choose a setting, they write a manuscript, and then we teach them how to illustrate their book. And in week 10, they publish it. And they publish it online in this global library for free. And today, and we've only launched it on Thursday, we have 20,000 kids enrolled in 50 countries, totally free. And there's 3 weeks left to go until it opens. And I hope to get 100,000 kids on board. I've got Linfield Learning Village. I don't know if you know who they are, but the most innovative public school here in New South Wales. They've got all their primary kids coming on board as well. So, you know, there's the calling for this. We've got the tech. If we've got the skills, we've got the passion, then there are schools and children willing to come on board, and we can do big work here. You know, and this is what I said to my community actually. And I feel like I'm talking a lot. So if I am, then I'm sorry. But when I quit my job, you know, I had a meeting with all the families, and some of the mums were crying, and it was very sad, and I was crying. And I didn't really want to leave because I loved the kids and I loved the families, and it was a beautiful school. But I've said to the mums and dads, I've said, I always tell your kids that you've got to go for it. Like if you see something, big work, if you see some big work, you go for that big work. It doesn't matter how big it is, you go for it. You might fail, it could go horribly wrong, and you know, it doesn't matter, at least you tried. And so I said, I've got some big work I want to do, and I'm going to try and do the big work. And now I'm going for it, and it's feeling good, and it feels
one
right.
of the things that I really love about your project with Upschool is that as a 6 to 12 teacher myself, you know, I always have this, like many 6 to 12 teachers, we have this you know, dream that our children will decide they want to take on some project to save the world and you know, do good in the world and use their skills for more than just academic, you know, purposes or you know, their own betterment, but think about others as well. But you know, when you get kids who want to take on that project, it's often really hard to help them because, you know, I don't know how to find those projects out there in the world unless, you know, they do, and how to facilitate those projects. But what you've done in Upschool is to make it easy for teachers to help their children set up such projects like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, so what we've done basically is we've reached out to massive organizations, Medicine Sans Frontières and Greenpeace and Guide Dogs Australia and all these organizations, and said to them, give us some projects. What have you got going on? And they said, oh, you know, for example, the Jane Goodall Institute. Jane Goodall Institute, their CEO said, Gavin, we're building a chimpanzee sanctuary in Botswana. I was like, beautiful, sounds amazing. So they gave us a series of projects. For $1,000, you will feed a chimpanzee for 2 years. For $5,000, you will build an enclosure for 10 chimpanzees. For $10,000, we plant half a rainforest for them to live in when they're actually. And so we gather all these projects, we put them on our platform. And so the kids at the very beginning of term, before they even start any work, they get together and they look at all this big shopping list of projects and they say, ooh, I think we should do the chimpanzee one. And then they do a pitch to the school. All the kids get in groups and they pitch to the school, I think we should do this. And the other kids say, well, I think we should do this. And there's a big democratic vote. And then the vote speaks, and the teacher says, look, you have voted and you have spoken, and we are building a library in Malamchi in Nepal. And then, you know, some kids are like, well, I didn't choose that one, but I understand the democratic process and we're all in this together. And then this big move starts where all the kids start their work, but they're all working towards something. So for example, in the book writing thing, they're not only learning how to write a book, because that would be just, anyone can teach that. We can all teach narrative writing. In week 1, they choose a project. And then in week 10, they lodge their book onto the platform and it's for sale. And people all around the world can buy this book. But when they get to the checkout to buy the book, he says, where would you like your money to go? And they say, I would like my profits to go to the chimpanzee enclosure. And the profits go, and the kids say, hey, I worked hard, I was determined, we worked as a group, and I've just saved 15 chimpanzees by writing a story. So like, you know, that brings like education and intention and brings them together perfectly. And, you know, one thing I've learned through Montessori, and this is, I never knew this before Montessori, was once children realize their power, once they know their power, you cannot take that power away from them ever again. They've got it. When they know, you know, I was working with a school this week here in Sydney, and it's a Christian school over here in Sydney, and they've taken on our project. I went to visit them, and I was seeing what they were up to. And I've said to the girls who've been doing the project, how's it going so far? How does this work feel compared to the other work you do? And she said, the one girl said, Gavin, it feels like real work. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, the other day I called the Prime Minister's office. And I said, wow, why? And she said, because I can. And I said, how do you know you can? And she said, because you told me I can. And I was like, wow, you know, in one of the videos, I said, think big. If you want to call the Prime Minister, you call the Prime Minister. And so she went to the principal's office. She knocked on the door. She said, can I use the telephone? The principal was like, what do you mean can use the telephone? Kids don't use the telephone. And she said, I just want to call the Prime Minister's office. And then the principal also was like, you know what? Kids can use the telephone. I never thought of that. And of course they can use a telephone. Kids are very, very, they're smart. They can use an iPad. They can use a telephone. But it's just like, you know, that change of mindset of like kids knocking on the principal's door in some schools is a big no-no. Like, don't even think about knocking on the principal's door. But of course you can. This is your school and it's my school. And you can use the telephone and you can write a letter to the politicians and they might not reply, but they will eventually. And one girl said, Gavin, one thing I've learned is and she was very, you know, it was very beautiful. It's like always talking to an adult. She said, Gavin, one thing I've learned is there are many hurdles in life, but you've just got to keep on going and eventually you will overcome them and somebody will say yes. And I was like, can you record that on camera? Say that on camera. No, it was so good. But you know, like that's what Montessori does. Like it gives you that freedom to just do that. And look, I said this week online to a few people. I have this T-shirt made and it had just yes in massive letters, Y-E-S. And when I was a Montessori teacher in stage 3, I said to the kids, I said, here's the deal. I'm busy. I'm really busy. I'm teaching and I'm working. I'm doing paperwork. I'm just busy. If I'm not teaching you, I'm busy. You don't need to disturb me. And you don't need to ask me any questions. If you've got a question, look at my T-shirt. The answer is on my T-shirt. Just look at it before you ask. And when I first took that on, I'd see kids in the class like they'd be coming over to me to and they'd see that and they'd just turn away and go, okay, I know the answer is yes, I can just go and get the black card out of the cupboard, or I can use the scissors, or I can sit on the floor, or I can go to the toilet, I can change seats, I can get the paint, or I can work with a different person. It was all yes. And so, you know, like when schools are not equipped to say yes yet, we're still looking at education as a control. If I'm in control of the kids and they're all quiet and the principal comes down the corridor, he says, oh, wow, Barbara, your class was so quiet, doing an amazing job. Actually, what he should be saying is, Barbara, your class is quiet, you're failing these students by not allowing them to communicate and learn from each other. Peer-to-peer learning and mentorship is one of the greatest avenues for learning ever discovered. You are failing the class, you need to go into some formal training. But actually, no, in most schools around the world, if kids are quiet with their fingers on their lips and their knees are crossed and the straw hat on, you're doing a great job, Barbara, but you're not doing a great job in actual fact. And so until that changes, we have a systemic problem running through education systems across the world. And I'll tell you where it starts, Mark. It starts in university, where you have this, and I said this to you last week in the big, you know, the Voice of Montessori meeting that we had, where you have a lecturer. And the lecturer is inspirational lecturer. And I've been to do lectures at university before, when you empower your teachers, the trainees, they're going out to school and they're like, you know what, I'm a teacher. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get those kids and I'm going to get them where they need to be. And I'm going to change the world. I'm going to save this planet and I'm going to equality and there's going to be sustainability. I'm going to do this. And they get that job and they go to the principal's office and he says, you've got the job. And they go, wow, can't wait to be the teacher of my dreams. And he says, by the way, here's the curriculum. And I said, well, that curriculum is pretty flat and I don't really like the content. Would you mind if I just go? Don't even think about it. We've got Nessa coming in a term and I don't want you going off piste. You say what's on that paper, you get it in the kids' books, you put a gold star on it to give everyone an A, and then you'll keep your job. But if you do go left piste, then I'm afraid you're not going to last very long here. And that's the big problem, is that there's no trust from the top down. Our government doesn't trust our universities, they don't trust our teachers or principals, and therefore we can't trust our kids. And the whole thing comes falling down, and it's literally all about trust. And until that changes, until we put teachers in the same spot as doctors, architects, all of these professionals, this is a profession. You are a professional. You've done 4 years. Until we trust them to do the job that they know how to do, we have a problem on our hands.
Gavin, you have a lot to say. It's always so fun talking to you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We probably should get you back. And I didn't do a very good job of including everything else, I'm afraid, in the discussion because we've kind of monopolized the conversation. But I'm sorry about that, our audience, our participants as well. But we'll have you back sometime. But for now, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being interviewed.
No, honestly, it's my pleasure. And to be a part of this network and be a part of the people in this community is beautiful. But we've got a fight on our hands, right? We've got to do something about this. Otherwise, we're going to witness it crumbling down beneath our feet. And we can't let that happen. It's not going to be possible. So,
well, your energy and enthusiasm is very infectious. So it's wonderful to talk to you. So thank you. And we'll hopefully see you again on Montessori Lives.
It's my pleasure. And if any of you are running schools out there and you wish to have a look at Upschool and see if you want to take it on in your school, it's completely free. And but you'll get sick of me because I'll be there every day in your schools bothering you and talking to the kids. But anyway, it's fun. It's all cool.
What's the URL?
Upschool.co.
Upschool.com. Great.
Co, not com.
Co.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we want to be cooperative, and so we want to go with the co, not the com. We could have had both, but we went with co. So anyway, Mark, look, I appreciate you and everything that you do. You've become a dear friend of mine now, and I love working alongside you. And me and you, buddy, we are taking Montessori to mainstream.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are. It's going so well. And I quote, one of our teachers this week saying, I had lost my mojo in education. I forgot what education was. And now I feel like I've been born again since I have discovered Montessori. And she's only seen 1% of Montessori.
That was a public school in Melbourne.
Wait until she gets the other 99%.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Gavin. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.